The last time my sister saw me cry, I was a crumpled heap on my bedroom floor, surrounded by fabric swatches for bridesmaid dresses. The last time she heard my voice break, I was begging her for an explanation she refused to give. 1 year later, she walked into my corner office for a job interview, and the only thing that broke was her. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't a single event. It was a slow, quiet, methodical dismantling of the life she stole from me, and believe me, I enjoyed every single second of it. If you've ever been wronged so badly it felt like it rewired your soul, then you know that justice isn't always about getting even. Sometimes it's about taking back control. This is the story of how I took back everything. Stick around, and if you find yourself nodding along, hit that like button and subscribe. Part 1. The Perfect Lie. The diamond felt like a tiny star had landed on my finger. It was ostentatious, probably more than we could afford, but that was Adam. He was a man who believed in grand gestures. We were sitting in our favorite Italian restaurant, the one with the checkered tablecloths and the Chianti bottles dripping with years of candle wax. The entire restaurant had burst into applause when he'd gotten down on one knee, and I'd felt a blush creep up my neck, a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. I was Clara Taylor, 26 years old, and my life was, for the first time, utterly and completely perfect. "I can't believe it," I whispered, turning my hand back and forth under the candlelight, watching the facets catch the flame. Adam reached across the table, his hand covering mine. His palms were always warm, solid. "Believe it, Clara. You and me. Forever." His smile was the kind that could sell sand in a desert. It was wide, genuine, and reached all the way to his crinkling blue eyes. He was handsome, of course, but it was more than that. He had a gravitational pull, a charisma that made everyone in his orbit feel like the most important person in the room.
And he had chosen me.
When we told my family, the reaction was electric. My dad shook Adam's hand with a firm, approving grip. My mom cried, dabbing her eyes with a napkin, already picturing grandchildren. And then there was my sister Emily. She was 2 years younger than me, and we were what people politely call opposites. Where I was organized and a planner, Emily was spontaneous and chaotic. I built my career steadily in marketing, while she drifted between freelance graphic design gigs, always chasing a passion that seemed to change with the seasons. I had a 5-year plan. She had a vague idea for the weekend. We were close, but there was always a subtle, unspoken competition humming beneath the surface, one I always pretended not to notice. Emily rushed forward and wrapped me in a hug that felt just a little too tight, her nails digging slightly into my back. "Oh my God, Clara. I'm so happy for you." "For us," she squealed, pulling back to admire the ring. Her smile was a perfect, dazzling white. He finally did it. I was beginning to think he'd never get around to it. She winked at Adam, a familiar, flirty gesture I'd seen her use on 100 other guys. I'd always dismissed it as just Emily being Emily. Now, looking back, I see the darkness coiled behind her bright, excited eyes. It was the possessive glimmer of a dragon who'd just seen a new piece of gold to add to its hoard. The next few months were a blur of blissful, stressful planning. Venue deposits, guest lists, cake tastings, it was overwhelming, but Adam was my rock. He'd rub my shoulders after a long day of fielding calls from vendors whispering, "It'll all be worth it, I promise." Emily, in her role as maid of honor, was surprisingly dedicated. She was at every dress fitting, offered opinions on every floral arrangement, and even helped me address hundreds of invitations until her fingers were smudged with ink. "You're taking this so seriously," I told her one evening, as we sat on my living room floor, surrounded by stacks of ivory cardstock. "I'm impressed." She looked up from the envelope she was sealing, a strange, unreadable expression on her face. "Of course I am. It's your big day. I want everything to be perfect for you." Her support felt like a balm, easing the small, nagging anxieties that came with planning a life with someone. I felt guilty for ever thinking there was a competition between us. She was my sister. She loved me. This was proof. The signs, however, were there. They were small, almost insignificant tremors before the earthquake. A text from Adam that came in while she was in the room, making her glance up a little too quickly. The way she'd laugh a little too long at his jokes, touching his arm as she did. The time I found them in the kitchen, talking in hushed tones that immediately stopped the second I walked in. Just discussing my maid of honor speech, Emily had said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Don't want to give away any of my embarrassing stories about you just yet. I brushed it off. I was being paranoid. Stressed. The wedding was getting to me. I had to trust them. Adam was the love of my life, and Emily was my sister. To imagine anything else was to imagine a world of impossible cruelty. The day it all fell apart was a Tuesday, 2 months before the wedding. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. I'd just approved the final proof for our ceremony programs. The ink smelled of finality, of promises. Adam was supposed to meet me at home so we could go over the seating chart, a task I was dreading. He was late, which was unusual. When he finally walked through the door, his face was pale, his shoulders slumped. He didn't kiss me hello. He didn't even meet my eyes. He just sank onto the sofa, the leather groaning under his weight. A cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into my stomach. Adam? What's wrong? He stared at his hands, turning them over as if he'd never seen them before. The words, when they came, sounded like they were being dragged out of him, each one a shard of glass. Clara, we need to talk. My heart hammered against my ribs. Okay, I said slowly, sitting in the armchair opposite him, creating a chasm between us. I can't do this. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Can't do the seating chart? I know, it's a nightmare, but we can. No. He cut me off, finally looking at me. His blue eyes, the ones I had daydreamed about, were hollow. I can't do this. The wedding. Us. The world tilted on its axis. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounded like a roar. I could feel the blood draining from my face. What are you talking about? Adam, what happened? He recited the lines then, the coward's cliché, the words so obviously rehearsed they felt like an insult. It's not you, Clara. It's me. I'm not ready for this. I thought I was, but I'm not.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry. My voice was a choked whisper. We've sent out the invitations. We've paid deposits. My dress is hanging in my mother's closet. You're not ready? 2 months before we're supposed to get married, you're suddenly not ready. Every denial, every plea, every tear that streamed down my face was met with the same hollow-eyed, robotic repetition. I'm sorry. I just can't. He left 20 minutes later, leaving the engagement ring on the coffee table. The tiny star on my finger was gone, and in its place was a gaping, black void. I didn't move for hours. I just sat there, staring at the ring, as the afternoon sun faded to a bruised purple dusk, the silence in the apartment screaming louder than any argument we'd ever had. The next few weeks were a living nightmare. Calling the guests, canceling the venue, the caterer, the photographer. Each call was a fresh humiliation, my voice trembling as I explained that the wedding was off. My mother handled most of it, her voice a mixture of pity and fury. I barely ate. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, my mind replaying that final conversation on a relentless loop. What did I do wrong? Was I not enough? The pain wasn't just emotional, it was physical. My chest ached with a deep, constant pressure, as if a fist was clamped around my heart, squeezing. Emily was a constant presence, a flurry of feigned concern. She brought me soup I didn't eat, offered to watch movies I couldn't focus on, and held me while I sobbed. He's a monster, Clara, she'd murmur, stroking my hair. You're so much better off without him. I can't believe he would do this to you. Her sympathy was like salt in the wound, and I couldn't understand why. It felt performative.
Hello.
But I was too broken to question it. I leaned on her, my little sister, my maid of honor, my best friend. I told her everything. I poured out all my grief, my confusion, my rage. She just absorbed it all, her face a perfect mask of compassion. The truth came out by accident. It was 3 weeks after the breakup. I was trying to cancel our honeymoon plane tickets, a painful process that involved being on hold for nearly an hour. To get the refund, I needed Adam's frequent flyer number, which was saved on his old tablet he'd left at my apartment. I powered it on, my fingers shaking as I navigated the familiar interface. His email was still logged in. I told myself I was just looking for the airline confirmation. It was a lie. I was looking for an answer. Any answer that made more sense than "I'm not ready." I didn't have to look far. The inbox was filled with emails from vendors and a few from his work. But there was another chain. One with a familiar name. Emily. The subject line of the most recent one was simple. Tonight? My blood ran cold. I clicked it. The email was from Adam, sent the day before he broke up with me. "We can't keep doing this. We have to tell her. I feel sick." My breath hitched. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning the chain, my world crumbling with every word. There were dozens of them, going back months. Flirty messages. Secret plans to meet up. And then, the one that shattered me completely. An email from Emily, sent from her graphic design account, dated 3 months ago, just after we'd gotten engaged. "I know she's your fiancé, Adam. But the way you look at me, the way we talk, you can't tell me you don't feel it too. She can give you a stable life, a plan. I can give you passion. Don't make the biggest mistake of your life." I saw it all. Her over-the-top support was a cover. Her dedication to the wedding planning was a way to keep her enemy close. The hushed conversations, the lingering touches, the shared glances, it was all real. I hadn't been paranoid. I had been a fool. I sat there, on the floor of my now-silent apartment, the tablet screen glowing in the dark. The grief I had been feeling was suddenly burned away by something new. Something white-hot and clarifying. Rage. A pure, unadulterated rage that sang in my veins. My sister. My own sister had looked me in the eye, held me while I cried, and lied. She hadn't just watched my world burn. She had struck the match. And as the truth settled into the marrow of my bones, I knew this wasn't an ending. Oh no. It was the beginning of a war. She just didn't know she was the enemy yet. Part 2, The Exile and the Forge. The confrontation wasn't a dramatic, movie scene showdown. It was something far worse. It was quiet, pathetic, and utterly soul-crushing. I called Emily and told her to come over, my voice eerily calm. When she arrived, she was carrying a tub of my favorite ice cream, her face arranged in its usual mask of sisterly concern. "Hey you," she said brightly. "I thought you could use a little pick-me-up." I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside and gestured toward the coffee table, where the tablet lay open, her email glowing on the screen. I watched her eyes flicker from my face to the device. I saw the exact moment the realization hit her. The color drained from her cheeks, and the carton of ice cream slipped from her fingers, landing on the floor with a soft, dull thud. "Clara, I can explain." "Can you?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "Can you explain how you helped me pick out a wedding dress while you were sleeping with my fiancé? Can you explain how you held me while I sobbed over a man you were actively stealing from me? Please, Emily. Explain it. Make it make sense." She stammered, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape route. "It wasn't like that, it happened. We couldn't help it. We have a connection." "A connection?" I let out a laugh, but it was a broken, ugly sound. "You have a connivance. A conspiracy. You saw something you wanted, and you decided that my happiness was a fair price to pay for it. The worst part was that Adam was there. She must have called him on her way over, a frantic SOS. He walked in without knocking, looking just as pale and pathetic as she did. He saw the tablet and immediately launched into the same tired excuses. "Clara, we never meant to hurt you," he started. "Don't," I snapped, holding up a hand. The sight of them together, a united front of betrayal, solidified the rage in my chest into something hard and permanent, like diamond. "Don't you dare stand in my apartment and tell me you didn't mean to hurt me. You made a choice. Both of you. Every secret text, every hidden meeting was a choice. You chose to betray me. Now you've chosen each other. So get out. They tried to argue, to justify, to apologize. Their words were meaningless noise, the buzzing of insects. They spoke of love and uncontrollable feelings, as if they were characters in a tragic romance instead of two selfish people who had detonated a bomb in the middle of my life. Emily even started to cry, fat, crocodile tears rolling down her cheeks. Please, Clara, she wept. Don't let this ruin us. You're my sister. No, I said, the word coming out as cold as ice. You were my sister. Now you're just the woman who sleeps with my leftovers. Get out of my home. I watched them leave together, and that image burned itself onto the back of my eyelids. The two most important people in my life, walking away as one. The fallout with my family was almost as painful. My parents, caught in the middle, pleaded for peace. My mother's phone calls were full of tired sighs and platitudes. She's your only sister, Clara, she'd say. And Adam, well, maybe this was for the best. Better to find out now than after you were married. They wanted me to forgive, to move on, to attend family dinners and pretend that my entire future hadn't been stolen from me by the person who was supposed to be my maid of honor. They saw it as a messy love triangle. I saw it as a declaration of war. Their refusal to see the depth of the betrayal, their desire to smooth things over for the sake of appearances, felt like a second, deeper cut. They weren't just asking me to forgive her. They were asking me to invalidate my own pain. That's when I knew I had to leave. My hometown wasn't a home anymore. It was a graveyard of memories, a place where every street corner held a ghost of a life that was no longer mine. Friends of the family would look at me with pity. People would whisper in the grocery store. I would be forever defined as the poor girl who was left at the altar, whose own sister stole her fiancé. I refused to be that person. Packing was an act of brutal treason. I threw away every photo of Adam, every gift, every note. I sold the furniture we'd bought together. I packed only what I needed into my small sedan, clothes, books, and the burning core of my rage. I didn't say goodbye to Emily or Adam. I sent a short, curt email to my parents, telling them I had accepted a job transfer and would be in touch. Then I drove. My new life started in a cramped, overpriced apartment in the city, with a view of a brick wall. The marketing firm I transferred to was larger, more competitive, and utterly anonymous. No one knew my story. No one gave me pitying looks. I was just Clara Taylor, the new associate project coordinator. A blank slate. The first few months were hell. The loneliness was a physical weight, pressing down on me in the silence of my apartment. Grief would ambush me at inconvenient times, in the middle of a meeting, in the dairy aisle at the supermarket. But every time the sadness threatened to drown me, the rage would pull me back to the surface. It became my fuel. I poured everything I had into my work. I was the first one in the office and the last one to leave. The steady hum of the servers and the smell of stale coffee became my companions. While my colleagues went out for happy hour, I stayed late, dissecting campaign data and volunteering for the projects nobody else wanted. I took the grunt work, the thankless tasks, the high-pressure deadlines. The pain of my past was a roaring fire in my gut, and I channeled every ounce of that heat into my career. It wasn't the noble pursuit. It was a desperate escape. Work was logical. Effort equaled results. There were no hidden motives or secret betrayals in a spreadsheet. Its brutal simplicity was a comfort. My boss, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Davies, started to notice. She saw the quality of my work, my obsessive attention to detail, my willingness to do whatever it took to get the job done. I started to climb. From associate coordinator to project manager. I led a small team on a difficult account, and we landed a massive success, exceeding all projections. The praise felt good, but it was fleeting. The real reward was the feeling of control. With every successful project, with every bit of recognition, I was rebuilding the self-worth that had been stolen from me. I was proving, if only to myself, that I was more than just a jilted fiancé. There were moments of doubt, of course. Late nights when I'd stare at my reflection in the dark office window, a hollow-eyed stranger looking back at me, and I'd wonder what I was doing. I nearly broke once. It was around Christmas, a year after the breakup. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom, a picture of the family around the Christmas tree. There they were, smiling. Emily and Adam, side by side, his arm draped possessively around her shoulder. They looked happy. A wave of nausea and despair washed over me. What was I doing, working myself to the bone in a city where I knew no one, while they were back home, living the life that should have been mine? I almost packed it all in. I almost drove back, ready to scream, to cry, to beg for my old life back. But then I looked around my office. At the project boards covered in my handwriting. At the award my team had won, sitting on my desk. This was mine. I had built this. They hadn't given it to me, and they couldn't take it away. The despair receded, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just building a new life. I was building an empire on the ashes of the old one. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that it wasn't enough to just succeed. One day, somehow, they would have to see what I had become. They would have to look up at me from the ruins of the life they'd built on my heartbreak, and they would know exactly what they had lost. That thought, more than anything else, was what kept me going through the long, lonely nights. I wasn't just running from my past anymore. I was building a weapon. Part 3. The Ghost at the Feast. The turning point wasn't a single event, but a slow, steady accumulation of victories. After the success of the high-pressure account, Mrs. Davies started giving me more responsibility. I became her go-to person for fires that needed putting out, for clients that needed charming, for numbers that needed crunching. I thrived on the pressure. It kept the ghosts at bay. I learned the language of corporate warfare, how to navigate office politics, how to build alliances, how to present my successes in a way that made them seem both effortless and indispensable. 18 months after I'd arrived in the city as a broken refugee, Mrs. Davies called me into her office. It was a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the sprawling city below. This office was a symbol of power, of arrival. "Clara, I'm retiring at the end of the quarter," she said, getting straight to the point. "And I've recommended you as my replacement. The board agrees. The department manager position is yours if you want it." The air left my lungs. Department manager. It was a quantum leap. I would go from managing projects to managing the people who managed the projects. I would have my own team, my own budget, my own corner office, a seat at the table. Yes, I managed to say, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Of course. Thank you." "Don't thank me," she said with a rare, thin smile. "You earned it. You've put more blood, sweat, and tears into this firm in the last year and a half than some people do in a decade. Just try to get some sleep now and then, Taylor. It's a marathon, not a sprint." Walking out of her office that day, I felt a strange sense of calm. The frantic energy that had propelled me for so long finally settled. I had done it. I had built a fortress around myself, so high and so strong that no one from my old life could ever touch me again. I had a new identity, Miss Taylor, department manager. The jilted, heartbroken girl I used to be was a ghost, a story I could barely remember. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of transitioning into the new role. I spent my days in meetings, learning the intricacies of departmental budgets and strategic planning. My new office was cleared out, painted, and filled with my things. I stood at the massive window, looking down at the tiny cars and people below, and felt, for the first time since Adam had uttered the words, "I can't," a profound sense of peace. I was in control. It was on a rainy Thursday that my past came walking back into my life. My assistant, a cheerful young woman named Sarah, buzzed me on the intercom. "Miss Taylor, your 10 o'clock interview is here. Shall I send her in?" "Yes, please, Sarah," I said, pulling a file from a stack on my desk. We were hiring for a mid-level graphic designer role, someone to support the senior creative team. The position reported directly to me. I glanced at the resume on top. Emily Peterson. My blood went cold. Peterson. It took me a second to realize she was using her maiden name, our name. I scanned the work history. A series of short-term freelance gigs. Unstable.
Patchy.
Not particularly impressive. There was no mention of Adam, no hint of their shared life. Curious. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Was it a coincidence? Could there be another Emily Peterson with a similar design background? But deep down, I knew. It was her. The odds were astronomical, but the universe, it seemed, had a flair for cruel irony. I had a choice. I could have Sarah tell her the position was filled. I could feign sickness. I could pass the interview off to someone else. It would be the easy thing to do, the safe thing. It would keep my fortress intact. But then, an image flashed in my mind. Emily's face, pale and shocked, as she saw the tablet on my coffee table. The memory of her crocodile tears. The picture of her and Adam smiling by the Christmas tree. The cold, hard resolve that had fueled me through countless lonely nights solidified into a single, brilliant, terrifying idea. Vengeance hadn't just knocked on my door. It had submitted a resume. "Send her in," I repeated, my voice as smooth as glass. I leaned back in my high-backed leather chair, the chair that signified my power, my success. I clasped my hands on my polished oak desk and waited. The door opened and she walked in. She looked worn. The spontaneous, vibrant spark she'd always carried was gone, replaced by a nervous tension. There were faint lines of stress around her eyes and mouth that hadn't been there before. She was clutching her portfolio to her chest like a shield. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, a candidate trying to project humility. "Thank you for seeing me," she began, her voice practiced. "I'm really excited about this opportunity at." She looked up, and she saw me. The shock on her face was everything I could have hoped for, and more. It was a perfect, beautiful tableau of horror. Her jaw went slack. The portfolio slipped from her grasp, spilling its contents across the plush carpet. Her carefully constructed professional demeanor shattered into a million pieces. "Clara," she whispered, the name a puff of disbelief. You work here?" I let the silence hang in the air for a beat too long, savoring it. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I gave her a look of cool, detached appraisal, the same look I would give any other candidate. "Not just work here, Emily," I said, my voice calm and even, a stark contrast to the thunderous roaring in my ears. "I run this department. The position you're applying for reports directly to me. Please have a seat. Let's talk about your qualifications." The look on her face was priceless. It was a cocktail of fear, confusion, and utter humiliation. She sank into the chair opposite me, her movements stiff and robotic. She was trapped. If she fled, she'd look unprofessional and burn a bridge. If she stayed, she had to submit to my authority. The interview was a masterclass in psychological torture. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't mention our past. I didn't have to. The power dynamic of the room did all the work. I asked her pointed, difficult questions about the gaps in her resume. I scrutinized her portfolio, pointing out inconsistencies and amateurish design choices with surgical precision. "This font pairing is unconventional," I'd say, tapping a finger on a page. "Can you walk me through your creative reasoning here?" She stumbled and stammered, her explanations growing weaker and more desperate with each question. She was sweating under the cold lights of the office. The confident, charming woman who could talk her way into anything had vanished. In her place was a nervous, unprepared applicant who was completely out of her depth. I learned through her fumbled answers that she and Adam had moved to the city a few months ago for his job. It hadn't worked out between them. "Creative differences," she mumbled, which I interpreted as him getting tired of her lack of ambition now that the thrill of the chase was over. So here she was, alone in a new city, desperate for a job. A stable job. The kind of job I could give her. Or take away to be why the end of the interview, she was visibly trembling. "Thank you for your time, Emily," I said, closing her portfolio and pushing it gently back across the desk toward her. "We have several other candidates to consider, but we'll be in touch." She practically ran out of the room. That evening, I sat in my office long after everyone else had gone home, staring out at the glittering city lights. The rage that had been my constant companion was quiet. In its place was a feeling of cold, crystalline clarity. I wasn't going to destroy her. I wasn't going to scream or yell or expose her. That would be messy, unprofessional. It would make me look unhinged. And oh, my revenge would be quieter, sharper. I was going to give her the job. I was going to bring her into my world, the world I had built from the rubble of the one she had destroyed. I would give her a front row seat to my success. And then, slowly, methodically, and within the perfectly acceptable bounds of corporate management, I was going to let her watch herself fail. She would call me Ms. Taylor. She would ask for my approval. She would depend on me for her paycheck. I would own her professional life. And in doing so, I would take back every last ounce of power she had ever had over me. The war wasn't over. It had just entered its final, most delicious phase. Part 4. The clicking of the heels. The email from HR went out the following Monday. Emily had gotten the job. Her acceptance email came back within minutes, a single, pathetically eager sentence. I'm sure she was confused, maybe even hopeful. Perhaps she thought this was my twisted version of an olive branch, a sign that I was willing to let bygones be bygones. She would soon learn how wrong she was. Her first day was an exercise in controlled humiliation. I had Sarah show her to her desk, which I had specifically chosen. It wasn't in a corner or by a window. It was in a high-traffic area, a small cubicle right in the center of the open-plan office, where everyone could see her screen, where every conversation she had could be overheard. It was a fishbowl. The first team meeting was that morning. I walked into the conference room, and the friendly chatter immediately died down as my team straightened up. I was a respected boss, demanding but fair. They looked at me with a mixture of admiration and healthy fear. And then there was Emily, sitting at the far end of the long table, trying to make herself as small as possible. Good morning, everyone. I began, my eyes sweeping across the room before landing deliberately on her. I'd like you all to welcome the newest member of our creative team, Emily Peterson. Emily, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your background. All eyes turned to her. She froze like a deer in headlights. She mumbled a few incoherent sentences about her freelance work, her voice barely audible. The confident, life-of-the-party charisma she used to wield like a weapon was gone. In this room, under my authority, she was a nobody. The team gave her a polite, lukewarm round of applause before I moved on, leaving her to stew in her own awkwardness. My revenge was a death by 1,000 paper cuts, all delivered with a professional smile. I didn't scream or berate her. I simply managed her. Poorly performing employees are managed, and Emily, stripped of her usual tricks, was a very poor employee. Her first assignment was a series of digital banners for a low-stakes client. It was grunt work, the kind of task usually given to an intern. The deadline was tight, but perfectly reasonable for a designer of her supposed experience. I need these by end of day Friday, Emily, I told her, my tone brisk and businesslike. And please make sure you follow the client's brand guidelines to the letter. They're notoriously picky. She failed spectacularly. The designs she submitted were sloppy, rushed, and completely ignored the guidelines I had specifically pointed out. I called her into my office to review them. Emily, this isn't what I asked for, I said, pointing to my monitor. I wasn't angry, I was disappointed. It's a much more effective tool. The color palette is wrong, the font is off-brand, and the call to action is weak. This is the kind of work I'd expect from a first-year student, not a professional designer. Her face flushed a deep, mottled red. I'm sorry, I was a little rushed. Deadlines are a fundamental part of this job, I replied coolly. I need you to redo these. The final versions are due to the client by noon tomorrow. Don't be late. I made her work late into the night, redoing a task that a competent designer could have finished in a few hours. This became the pattern. I'd assign her a project just slightly above her actual skill level. I'd give her all the resources she needed to succeed, but I wouldn't hold her hand. And then I would watch as she floundered, her lack of discipline and genuine talent becoming painfully obvious to everyone. Her confidence, once her greatest asset, began to evaporate. She started second-guessing every choice. She'd hover by my office door, asking timid questions she should have known the answers to. Miss Taylor, could you just look at this before I go any further? She'd ask, her voice trembling slightly. You need to learn to trust your own judgment, Emily. I'd reply, without looking up from my work. I don't have time to micromanage you. The team noticed. They saw her missed deadlines, her shoddy work, her constant need for reassurance. The initial welcome faded into a polite but clear professional distance. No one invited her to lunch. Her ideas in brainstorming sessions were met with silence. She was becoming an outcast, not because I had said a single bad word about her, but because her own incompetence was alienating her from her peers. I had simply created the environment for her to fail all on her own. One afternoon, I overheard her talking to another designer, Mark, by the coffee machine. Her voice was a low, desperate whisper. I just don't know what to do. It's like nothing I do is good enough for her. Mark, a kind but straightforward guy, just shrugged. Miss Taylor is tough, but she's fair. If your work is good, she's your biggest champion. If it's not, well, you've got to step up your game. It was perfect. To the rest of the world, I was the demanding but fair boss. Only she and I knew the truth. The final straw was a presentation for a major new client. I assigned Emily a small but critical section. It was her chance to prove herself. I knew she was a terrible public speaker without her usual flirty charm to fall back on. She spent weeks preparing, her light on late into the evening. The day of the presentation, she walked to the front of the boardroom looking like she was heading to her own execution. She fumbled with her notes. Her voice was shaky. She lost her place, misquoted statistics, and when the client asked a simple follow-up question, she completely blanked. The silence that followed was excruciating. I had to step in, smoothly answering the question and transitioning to the next part of the presentation, saving the pitch, but sealing her fate. Her failure had been public, undeniable, and utterly humiliating. That evening, she was waiting for me in the lobby as I left the office. The building was empty, our footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale and drawn. She looked utterly defeated. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice cracking. I know you hate me. I get it. But why this? Why drag it out? Why not just fire me? I stopped and looked at her, really looked at her for the first time without the shield of my professional persona. I let her see the cold, hard anger that had been simmering for nearly 2 years. Fire you? I said, my voice low and steady. That would be a gift, Emily. An easy way out. You don't deserve easy. You took the most important thing in my life. You schemed, and you lied, and you destroyed my happiness without a second thought because you wanted what I had. You and Adam, you thought you could just take it and keep it forever. I took a step closer, my heels clicking sharply against the floor. He left you, didn't he? It didn't last. Because things built on such rotten foundations never do. And now your career is falling apart. You feel incompetent, disrespected, powerless. You feel like a failure. I let the words land, watching as a single tear traced a path through her makeup. I'm not doing anything to you, Emily. I finished, my voice dropping to a whisper. I'm just letting you feel what it's like to lose something you thought you could keep forever. Welcome to my world. I turned and walked away, not looking back. The sharp, rhythmic clicking of my heels on the marble floor was the only sound in the vast, empty lobby. It was the sound of victory, the sound of control. Emily lasted 2 more weeks. She submitted her resignation via email, citing personal reasons. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded it to HR. Her desk was cleared out by the end of the day. It was as if she had never been there. There was no goodbye party, no farewell card. She just vanished. That night, I stood at the window of my corner office, looking out at the endless sea of city lights. The rage was gone. The pain was a distant scar, no longer an open wound. I didn't feel elation or joy. I felt quiet. I felt a profound, unshakable sense of order restored. She had thrown my world into chaos, and I had calmly, quietly, and deliberately put it back together, exactly the way I wanted it. For the first time since the day Adam left, I finally felt completely and utterly in control again. And in the silence of my office, High above the rest of the world, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Justice, I had learned, is a dish best served cold, under the fluorescent lights of a corporate office. They say success is the best revenge, but sometimes, revenge is the best revenge. It's about taking back the narrative and writing your own ending. My story wasn't about hate. It was about reclaiming my power. If you've ever had to fight to get your power back, let me know your story in the comments below. What does justice look like to you? Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice served.
Until next time.